When do I fertilize azaleas and rhododendrons? How do I protect against scale? And the most popular question that we were asked last week, what setting do I use on my spreader for the products related to triple play? I've got answers to these questions and more coming up on Garden Sense. Hey everybody, I'm Tim Ward and welcome back to Garden Sense. Folks, I hope you had a wonderful and safe St. Patrick's Day this past weekend. Folks, I've got to tell you, we were absolutely inundated with email questions last week. And the number one question that we were asked was, what settings do I use for the turf truss fertilizers, gallery, and dimension? So that's one of the questions that we're going to deal with here today. We did select 5 total for today's podcast, so buckle up everybody. Let's jump right in. The first question for today is from Frank. Tim, love your show. I have some moss to be controlled. When is it best to apply Moss Max around fertilizer and weed control? So I wouldn't worry too much about timing the application of Moss Max around what you do with the turf truss fertilizers or what you do with the gallery and the dimension weed controls. Instead, what you really need to hone in on is when the moss in your lawn starts to green up and is actively growing again. That's when you want to put down that Moss Max application. Now, typically, that's going to be in the early to mid-spring, but it's going to depend a little bit on where you are located and the type of weather, obviously, that you're experiencing. Now, moss is the type of plant that may require multiple applications. Just the very nature of it can make it a little bit tough to kill, or at least from the standpoint of ensuring that you get all of it, because again, some of that plant can actually spread underneath the ground before it then punches through the surface. So when you get down Moss Max and you start to see that moss start to brown up, if you can, it would be really beneficial to you if you actually do your best to dig it up or pull it from the ground as best you can without damaging your lawn. Now, Moss Max is an iron-based product, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but I just want to warn you, if you haven't used it before, that when you put it down in conjunction with a turf truss fertilizer, the grass in that area is going to get really green because that particular area is going to have a lot of iron in it. Again, you're not hurting the grass. In fact, you're going to be helping it. It's going to look really, really good, but I just don't want you to be surprised if you've got spots of your lawn where it's really, really green because you've put down that turf truss fertilizer that contains iron and because you've put down Moss Max. The next question is from Jim. Hi, Tim. Is this the right time to fertilize azaleas and rhododendrons, or should I wait until April? So for azaleas and rhododendrons, you can actually fertilize anytime between early spring all the way up to mid-summer. Now, you don't want to go beyond mid-summer because what could happen is you could spark some new growth in either one of those plants. And what's going to happen is you may not have enough time for that plant to actually harden off before winter sets in, and some of that new growth could, in fact, die off. So anytime really between now and midsummer at the latest, you're going to be okay. And again, because these are flowering plants, I would make sure that you put down Garden Trust. It's available over at rosensonline.com. The third question is from, frankly, too many people to list. Hi, Tim. What are the spreader settings for turf truss fertilizer, gallery, and dimension? I had over 20 questions last week related to spreader settings for the turf truss fertilizer, for gallery, and for dimension. And some of you also expressed frustration in that your particular spreader wasn't listed on the back of the bags, and you wanted to know the exact setting for your particular spreader that we needed to adjust to so that those products would be correctly broadcast onto your lawn. So let's first talk about the settings, and then we'll actually deal with the other question as to why your particular spreader isn't listed. I'm going to give you some measurements, and what those measurements represent is the distance or the width of the flow gate opening on the spreader that then drops the chemical that you're applying down onto that rotary wheel and is then broadcast out onto your grass. So For turf truss fertilizers, what you actually want to measure is make sure that that flow gate, and you're going to have to get down there with a ruler, a tape measure, or something, is open about 5/16 of an inch. For gallery, you want it to be 3/8 of an inch. And then finally for dimension, you want it to be a 1/4 inch wide. So again, I know everyone would really like to just have me tell you that, hey, you need to have this on setting 3. This should be setting 8. Unfortunately, guys, there are simply hundreds of potential spreaders out on the market today. And there's no possible way that I can keep track of all of the spreader settings, because frankly, you would have to test every single spreader to know that. In addition, there's no way that the manufacturer being ProTrust, can list all of the spreaders on the back of their bags either, which is really why they just put down application rates. And that's really the industry, standard for most of the products that you're going to find, in terms of residential lawn care, is it's going to just simply be application rates, and it's going to be up to you to understand the type of spreader that you have to make sure that you're putting it down at the proper rate. So let me repeat those numbers again. For turf truss fertilizers, you want to measure that flow gate so that it's 5/16 of an inch open. For gallery, it's going to be 3/8 of an inch, and for dimension, it's going to be a 1/4 of an inch. Folks, as long as you get close to those openings, again, just try and make a mental note or write it down on a piece of paper which setting that represents on your particular spreader, and that way when you have to put down your applications in the summer or again in the fall, you don't have to email me back and ask the same question, but you'll actually know exactly what those measurements should be, because you'll have written down what that setting should be on your particular spreader. The next question comes from Andrea and is actually our weed of the week. Tim, what is this weed? Weed Beater Ultra does not kill it. I've been digging them up. Thanks for sending the picture in, Andrea. That's really, really helpful. This is actually a weed called groundsel, and it's actually considered a winter annual weed. Oddly enough, it's also considered a summer annual weed because these weeds are really resilient and they can germinate in the spring, the summer, and the fall. So what that means is you really have to take kind of a two-pronged approach in terms of attacking it. Now, you mentioned that Weed Beater Ultra wouldn't kill it. I'm a little bit surprised because Weed Beater Ultra is a really good product, and it actually does list groundsel as one of the weeds that it will help you eradicate. But my guess is what's happening is you'll apply Weed Beater, it may kill it or it'll start to die back, but then it's still going to come back a little bit later in the year. And that is not surprising, again, based on what I just said about the fact that it can germinate in the spring, summer, and the fall. So really what you want to do is right around now, you want to make sure that you put down an application of gallery. And then as you see groundsel start to spring up for any areas that maybe you missed, you didn't get gallery down quite in time, you're actually going to want to hit that with a weed beater or a VPG Fertilomes Weed Be Gone, something like that. Even 2,4-D will be a little bit effective as well. But then again, you're going to want to put down gallery again in the fall. So the idea is to start putting down some prevention chemicals into your lawn to kind of keep that groundsel at bay, and then attack the stuff that those particular products miss, and actually attack it with a Weed Beater Ultra or again any of those other weed killers that I mentioned. Now, if you don't care about your lawn and you really, really want to kill it, you can absolutely go the route of using a non-selective like Roundup or something like that. It'll kill it, but it'll also kill anything else it touches. So if it's in the middle of your lawn and you spray it down with Roundup, there's a good chance you're going to kill off the grass in that area as well. So if it were me, I'd recommend putting gallery down now, then spraying with Weed Be Gone, Weed Beater Ultra over the course of the late spring and early summer. And then in the early fall, I would get down a second application of gallery. And within about a year's time, if you kind of follow that routine, you should be able to eradicate this relatively well. The final question for today is from Michael. Tim, we have a bad scale problem on our laurels. We tried brushing off the scale in the fall, and it didn't seem to all come off. What and when do you recommend we apply in the soil? and on the bush to eradicate this problem this year. So just to recap for those of you who maybe don't have experience with scale, scale looks like it could be some type of a disease that is ongoing on your bushes or on your trees. Crepe myrtles, laurels, those are plants and bushes and shrubs that are particularly susceptible to scale, but it can happen on just about any particular tree or shrub. Now, it's actually not a disease. It's not caused by a bacteria. It's actually insects. And so you need to treat it like an insect infestation. And the best way to treat it is actually through preventative measures. So you said, Michael, that you actually had this occur in the fall and you did your best to kind of scrape off the scale. What you weren't able to get at last year, don't worry about. Just leave it the way it is. Because honestly, your only option at that point, because it's been hardened, is to physically scrape or cut it off of your laurels, and that can actually cause damage to the bush, and we don't want that. So in terms of how to prevent it this coming summer and this coming fall, here's what you want to do. The first thing you want to do is make sure that you put down neem oil. Just spray it all over the bush as often as once a week, but we really recommend once or twice a month. That should be sufficient. Then, once it starts to get pretty warm, say in that May to July time frame, you want to actually start also putting down Bio-Advanced 3-in-1. Now, this is actually an insect killer, and so what it's going to do is actually kill some of those scale insects if they are not driven away by the neem oil that you've been putting down. Now, let's say that both of those products don't work really, really well, and you're still seeing some scale activity, which, again, depending on where you live, is not out of the question. Even with all the applications you've made, your trees and your bushes can still get attacked by scale. So what you're going to want to do is, if you start to see them starting to form those white shells, is actually get some insecticidal soap, get a rag and some warm water, and you're going to want to actually physically rub off all of the insects that you're finding on your branches. And you need to rub it pretty vigorously to make sure that you get it off, because once they latch on to the branch itself and start to create that hard shell over top of them, they can be tough, as you've experienced, to get off. Now, finally, you also mentioned any type of a soil drench. And you can absolutely use one. What I would actually recommend is Bonide's Annual Tree and Shrub. This can be applied as a foliar spray, but it's much, much more effective as a soil drench. So again, pick up some neem oil, pick up some of that 3-in-1 by Bio-Advanced. You are going to probably want to grab some insecticidal soap just in case, but certainly get a rag and hot water to wipe off anything that those two products missed. And finally, for that soil drench, I'd recommend Bonide's Annual Tree and Shrub. All right, folks, just a couple final thoughts here. Guys, we are going to run that Turf Trust Triple Play promotion over at Rosen's Online probably through the end of the month. So if you have not taken advantage, the fact of the matter is we are in that window right now where those three products need to be applied. So head over to rosensonline.com and take advantage of the product savings as well as the free shipping that comes along with the Turf Trust Triple Play. Folks, we also need to start making sure that we're putting Kickstart down on our grass at least once a month. Now, you can put this down as often as once a week on your lawn. Again, it's an organic product and it's designed to strengthen the roots of your lawn, but it also works equally well on your trees, your shrubs, even your indoor plants. So head over to rosensonline.com, pick up some Kickstart. You'll be really, really glad you did. And then obviously, folks, looking ahead, we need to start thinking about how we're going to control grubs and insects. We got a couple of products by Bio-Advanced that work really, really well, and you can start putting those down depending on where you live, really in mid-April and into early May, again, for that kind of insect and grub prevention to really keep your lawn looking healthy. Folks, thanks so much for spending the time with us today. Remember, if you have a question, please send an email to me directly at tim@rosensonline.com. I answer each and every email that I receive. Folks, we appreciate the questions. We appreciate your business, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of the week. God bless.